just always so much fun.
Oh, yeah.
So fun to watch. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Roy's Tie-Dye Sci-Fi Corner. This is going to be episode 209, and we are discussing Persephone. And my very special guest is filmmaker, producer, writer-director, and my friend, Mr. Jeffrey Morris. Jeffrey, welcome.
Hey, Roy. Good to
How's
be
it
here.
going?
Good, as always. Good to be here.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
So, very excited to talk about Persephone, Jeffrey. And before we do, I just want to welcome some of the folks that are actually tuning in out there, just to welcome to the show.
Wait, hold on a second. Your cat. I was, because I saw that before, and I was like, is that a stuffed animal? I was like, he's got a stuffed animal sitting there. And then all of a sudden just started moving. I'm like, wow, that's actually okay.
Yeah, that's Marblehead. And
okay.
that's her safe area. And she likes being there when I work. And then sometimes she'll tune in. Back when I was actually broadcasting downstairs in the living room, or actually in the dining room area, her and Squeaker would kind of zoom by every now and then, and folks would get to see them. So yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's all good. She just got a plug. Christian is actually joining us from Canada. Welcome, Christian. Great to see you out there.
Hi, Christian.
Colin is also joining us from the UK. Welcome, Colin.
I'm Colin.
And yeah, we're doing that. We're doing that, Colin. Definitely. Hey, Lou. Lou is joining us from Rhode Island. Welcome.
Hey, Lou.
And Randy Lee is also joining us, and he's joining us from Wisconsin. And I see Jerry is out there as well. So
hey, Jerry.
Good to see you folks out there. So we're here on this Sunday night, and we're here to talk about Persephone. So before we get into that, Jeffrey, just to give a reminder to some of the viewers, how you got involved with everything. I mean, we've talked about this on the show, and just kind of just as a summary. I mean, you were very heavily influenced by the Apollo missions. And then also epic filmmaking such as 2001: A Space Odyssey, and then series such as Space 1999 we've talked about. But really, that led you to your interest in becoming a filmmaker. But you also had a strong interest in the science component of all that, which is kind of really interesting because the two really do tie together, and especially in an interesting way when you're actually making movies. So I think that it's a wonderful story to share.
Well, my interest in science fiction really began with an interest in science and exploration and that sort of thing. I definitely, as a child, my first interest was to become an astronaut. That was my first dream. I was going to be an astronaut, and I really, but being an astronaut wasn't, I guess, what I imagined. Being an astronaut was more like what we were seeing on shows like For All Mankind, or, you know what I mean? That's what I thought being an astronaut was going to be growing up, So I figured that, that was, at least in my early childhood, but, and subsequently, I mean, obviously I'd followed the Apollo program, was deeply, deeply interested in the Apollo mission, the moon missions, the stuff that was going on at the time. There was an energy there, and I know for some reason I picked up on it. It was just really fascinating to me from early childhood. I just thought it was so cool that people were walking on the moon, and that we had technology up there, and rovers and lunar modules and all that super cool stuff. That there was an energy and there was a perspective, and just I don't think we've ever had anything quite like that time since.
Right.
While while I certainly want to give kudos to all the astronauts who've gone up on the space shuttle, and subsequently, some of the private space initiatives and stuff like that. Obviously, these people have really traveled into space, but it's not the same as what was going on when they were going to the moon, or even the lead up to going to the moon.
Right.
The Mercury and Gemini and Apollo and all that. There was something really, really neat about that. It was inspirational. It was aspirational. There was a whole vibe, I think, culturally, that we were trying to accomplish something that felt like a cultural goal, and for many people. And gosh, it's something that I think could change things. I think if we could have that happen again, it would change the world. It could be a much more positive world if we could all have a dream like that, so that got me going, got me interested. I think seeing things like, so when you start out with the foundation of something like the real stuff, and then you start to see movies like 2001: A Space Odyssey, or even a cautionary tale like Silent Running,
Mm.
or Space 1999, in terms of the elements of the moon base and the Eagles and all that sort of thing. Those things all felt like a future that we could end up arriving in, and that could happen. And I think in a lot of ways, those futures happening could lead to something like the original Star Trek in a way, right? We would, by the 23rd century, be able to have ships that could travel between the stars and travel across the galaxy and that sort of thing. So that was definitely an aspect of it, if that makes sense. So all that was foundational for me in terms of my interest in what led me to get interested in science fiction. And I think that I also saw science fiction. I didn't see science fiction as being a fantasy thing or even an entertainment thing. I saw it as like a roadmap to the future in a way, right? More is like a guiding force. Science fiction can be a guiding force to lead us to a better tomorrow, or certainly it sometimes also be a thing that could let us talk about tomorrow cautiously, right? And really, analyze it and talk about, like, what do we want to avoid when we go into the future. That's something that science fiction should do. Unfortunately, it seems like now a lot of what was in science fiction years ago has now become like a guidebook or something. It's like these warning things. It's like, hey, we should do that. It's like, no. They're trying to say, don't do that. So it's very interesting. So anyway, to answer your question, that's a lot of what happened for me to get me into science fiction, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally does.
Mhm.
And you had the opportunity to work at NASA too, or work with
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I worked some with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, from like between 2000 and 2010. I did a lot of education and public outreach work, which is really interesting. They have, every space mission has a certain percentage allocated to sort of explaining the mission to the public,
Mhm.
helping the public understand. And so I was part of some of the budgets to get some of these things going and off the ground, which was fun. It was an incredibly rewarding experience. I mean, for me, there, I got to meet some of the people that I had read about going all the way back to my childhood, like,
Oh,
engineers and astronomers and physicists and astrophysicists and people like that I, that to me were heroes, growing up. So working in that, I got to meet some of those people. I got to work with Buzz Aldrin, for example,
that's so cool.
things like that. So that was really cool. He even wrote the foreword for one of my books, which was great. So yeah.
Yeah, but working with those people, and then you're taking my understanding is you were taking the information that they were presenting and really almost on a grander scale, but really relaying that information to the public so that it would be understood more
Yeah.
so.
Hmm.
So really, you're in a lot of ways, you're almost like the translator, or
Yeah, exactly. Because, I mean, these are hard ideas. They're big concepts. I mean, unfortunately, I mean, if I'm just really blunt, I think that our educational system has not. I think over the last 40 years, we've seen a decline in American education, and I think that it could have been a phenomenal positive experience. I think it could have been incredible. I think if we'd taken the buildup of what was happening in that late 60s, early 70s period, and then just sort of built upon it and built upon it and built upon it, and then tried to create a society um, where we encouraged intellectualism, encourage critical thinking, encourage creative thinking, all those sorts of things. I think we could have a very different society right now. So it's um, I'm I am it's frustrating to me because I think we could be in a much better place right now. And it what got me thinking about this is the idea that if we had a public that was more science literate, I think that these ideas wouldn't be so hard to understand or get your mind around, right? But I think we have a lot of people in the world right now that don't even think about the fact they're on a planet. They don't, they live in their town, they live in their neighborhood. That's the universe,
right.
right? Instead of going, the universe is not just our planet, but not just our solar system, not just our galaxy, but like, you know, the fact that we've been able to gather all this knowledge and being able to, you know, start to quantify and understand the universe that we're part of, right? You know, what we're like, as Carl Sagan described, we're like a part of the universe looking back on itself, trying to understand itself, right? That's fascinating to me. And, you know, I really wish we had done that. So when I was working with NASA, it was interesting because I was trying to take these big, lofty scientific concepts and find ways to bring them down, you know, to like, you know, how do you help everyday people understand the actual scale of the solar system? You know, stuff like that, or you know, so when you say a probe is going to Mars, what does that actually mean? You know, because I think that a lot of people don't know. It's like, well, really, like, where is Mars, right? Like, how far away is Mars? How long does it take to get there? What, you know, what is Mars? You know, and then you get, you know, you start looking at Jupiter and its moons, and these moons are so different. All of them are so incredibly, they're worlds unto themselves, you know, in a lot of ways, you know. So that, I just find those stories really fascinating and everything. So that was a really fun role for me, to find ways to help everyday people understand those big ideas, you know. So
Yeah, and I really think that, you know, kind of, you know, connecting to what you were saying before, I think that, and we've talked about this previously too, space exploration and just everything, you know, scientific in that aspect of things, we were headed in a really positive direction, and then it
yeah,
just kind of like just dropped. It
yeah,
dropped
yeah.
off, and that's what really probably damaged that type of thinking and that type of awareness. I mean, fortunately, we have some types, you know, we have Earth Day, which takes place in April, which
Right.
is very important. And because we, you know, it brings a realization that, you know what, this is our world and we really
hmm
need to take care of it. But
hmm
to your point, a lot of people, I don't think in terms of that. It's just like, you know, they'll just go through the motions, and just, you know, there's a lot of squandering, there's a lot of waste.
Yeah,
And
we don't have to. We really aren't challenged to to do a lot of thinking about our place in the universe. You know, it's just sort of like it's all about, like, you know, hanging out, having fun, watching
yeah,
stuff. I want to buy stuff. I want to watch stuff. I want to listen. You know what I mean? It's
yeah,
not. It's become a consumer driven thing, and you know, it's like people work their jobs so they can pay their bills, right, and everything. And look, I mean, it's we all do it because we have no choice. It's the system we live in, right? It's just sad to me because I think that, you know, and when I think about the you know, when I think about the world that I imagine us potentially growing up to live in, this is so far off. It's so far off. You know, it's like, for me, it's like, you know, here we are in 2023. If I'd said to you in 1975, what do you think 2023 is going to be like, right? I mean, there's no possible way that I would have said that this is
yeah,
what it would be, right? I mean, I would have 2023, I would have been like, well, you know, we would have cured all these diseases and everybody will be smart, and
yeah,
people will be, you know, people will care about each other, and people will work together, and, you know, and right, and it was like, it kind of felt like, maybe it was naive, you know, maybe it was incredibly naive, but I think that there was, if you were connected to the vibe at the time, connected to the vibe. And again, I think part of why we are where we are is there are actually more people who weren't connected to the vibe than we thought at the
hmm,
time, right? I mean, I think there were millions of people who didn't understand why we were going to the moon, who didn't, you know, and the truth is, we were going to the moon for kind of the wrong reason, in a way, right? We were going to the moon because we're trying to beat the Soviets, right?
yeah,
You know, and so it's like, well, once we beat the Soviets, it's like, well, cool, why are we going? You know, what's up? This looks like a big gray thing. Why are we going to the big gray thing? You know, it's right. It's, you know, so but there's a much bigger picture. And again, going back to when I think about education and the frustration I have that education, I think, failed us, is that, you know, I think the focus of education should have been like grabbing that and using as a catalyst to fire people up to go, all right, now that we're doing this, everybody think of how awesome this is. Think about how far we've come. Go from, you know, primitive man all the way up to the Wright brothers, all the way up to going to the moon, right? And think about those leaps in
hmm,
speed, right? All that stuff. I mean, you know, if we could have gotten everyone fired up and excited about that and said, let's keep going. And while we keep going, let's get better. You know,
yeah.
let's collectively get better as we do that, you know? So anyway, I don't mean to be on a soapbox, but it's
No, no, we just,
yeah. So it's like,
oh,
this is,
absolutely.
yeah, this is the stuff that motivates me. This is the stuff that drives me. So when we talk about Persephone or story like that, You know, a lot of the science fiction I'm creating is really about trying to get back to and to challenge us back to that pre-Star Wars world. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's why I thought it was important to really go over that foundation, just to
Sure.
touch upon it, because it really
Sure.
leads into what our discussion is going to be.
Sure.
Just a couple comments coming through. Shari's saying, "Hey guys, yes, Marble loves the eagle, as you can see, Jeffrey. She's kind of guarding it back there." Randy commented and said, "Wise words, very very true."
Thanks.
May is joining us,
Hey,
saying
May.
hello to everybody. And yeah, Randy just also commented and said that we've lost our imagination.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
What's scary
Yeah.
too is that what transpires now is really going to be influencing the next, maybe I hate to even say the next 20, 25 years. So it's really kind of scary in terms of that, because as you were saying, thinking 50 years ago, what 50 years later, which is the here and now, would be like, it's kind of scary to think what will the next 50 years be. You know what I
Well,
mean?
the thing is that it's sad to me, because when I think about what I imagine the next 50 years being, I can't find, you know, one of the things that I keep looking at is like, and this has nothing to do, again, you know where I am. We've talked a little bit about politics, and I told you I'm not left or right. I'm a common sense, you know,
Yeah.
middle of the road guy who, I even hate the term middle of the road, because I just think common sense shouldn't be in the middle. It just should be the way we operate, right?
Well said.
And you know, and to me, there could be ideas left, right, center, even not on the map, that could
Yeah.
be the ideas that could move us forward, right? And I think that this polarization and this binary thinking that we've gotten into is incredibly destructive and dangerous, and these silos that people get into where they're just listen to and hang out with people who think exactly like they do, you know. So my point is, when I do the sci-fi thing and I play the sci-fi game and I project it forward and I think, well, what's it going to be like 50 years from now? You know, I mean, I don't want to be gloom and doom about it, because there are possibilities, but I keep thinking, you know, it doesn't feel like there's any movement, a movement toward making things positive, a movement toward being right. There are no movements right now. You know,
Stagnating.
right? What's that?
It's stagnation right now.
Right. And so, you know, someone said we lost our imagination. And it's like, I just saw this trailer for this new Zack Snyder Netflix sci-fi thing, and it's so I watched this and it was like, it's everything I don't want to watch and everything I don't want to make as a filmmaker. You know what I mean? Like it's super violent, super harsh, super dark. Everyone's out to kill each other. Everyone's, you know, I'm like, that's the future, right? They think about it, that's the future that people keep projecting and creating for us, right? And then you think about, well, how do we create a positive? Even Star Trek, you and I've talked a little bit about that. When you watch the current incarnations of Star Trek, they're very dark.
Mm-hmm.
They've lost the optimism. They've lost the, you know, yeah. People are all like Strange New Worlds and say, well, that's fun and it's this and this. Yeah, you know, I guess, but it's not the same. It doesn't have the DNA of what Roddenberry was talking about, of like, we can get it together and we can go do better. We can all be part of something better. We can all make it, right? You know what I mean? It's like that. So anyway, I worry a lot about this one, especially with the advent of AI. And it's not that I'm afraid of AI itself. It's more that I think we have a world that's not prepared for it.
Mm.
You know, and I also think that you have human beings who potentially, first off, you have AI being created by human beings, and human beings are flawed, right? It's like, right? I mean, so the prejudices and perspectives and you know, there's so much, whether they intend to or not. I think the people who are creating AI are going to end up imbuing it with their own, you know, idiosyncrasies.
Their own thought processes and their feelings and what they
Yeah.
conceive. I mean,
And so
and that's
what
the
happens with
element.
that? What does that end up becoming? You know, and then the idea that by 2031, I was just reading, I read about this stuff all the time. I'm always studying about science and technology. And you know, there's a good prediction that artificial intelligence will surpass humanity by 2031. But, you know, if not sooner, it's like by 2031, it will be at a place where it's like, it'll be like, what are these things? You know what I mean? Right. It'll be a billion times, literally they're projecting a billion times smarter than the smartest human being by 2031.
That's crazy though.
Okay.
And
So like, what is that thing going to think of us? What is that? what is that thing we've created, right? We'll be like ants to it. It's really interesting. So there's a lot of challenges coming up. I mean, the things that are happening with our environment, the things that are happening with, again, as I talk about social media and all the polarization, and look at even just the fact that the way the world is reacting to this horrific situation happening in the Middle East right now, and you have all this like horrible ugliness coming out on all sides, and it's not pulling people together. It's like,
Yeah.
right, it's actually splitting people apart, and everything. So like I said, I don't want to make it sound like gloom and doom. It's just, man, I wish that we need a JFK again. I wish we had leaders like JFK, somebody who could come up and really point the way and really help illuminate a more positive way of approaching it. That ask not what you can do, ask what you can do, not for you, but for your country, right? It's
Right.
but and even asking it bigger, like, what can you do for your world? What can you do for your species? What can you do for the ecosystem? Those kind of questions.
And that's what's really kind of crazy, is that it's almost like it was like a subtle process of the way everything is started, and
Mhm.
then it's just kind of morphed in that direction, and it's like, here we are. I mean, I hate to think in terms of the movie Terminator, but when you think about when we saw that when it first came out, it's like, how
Yep.
could this actually happen? How could we be in this situation? And now, probably over the last, I would say, definitely a year, if maybe not even a year and a half, 2 years, there is not almost not one day that goes by where you do not hear AI being mentioned. It's almost
Oh
like
yeah.
it's a
Well,
part of
but
our
well,
normal.
okay. I mean, like I said, people can sit there and say, "Well, you're just being negative." It's like, oh, but I guess the question is like, how much do people really know what's going on? Because I've been reading about the fact that the Pentagon, for example, they are creating robotics and drones that are going to have lethal capability, and they're considering giving them artificial intelligence that can make decisions on whether or not to kill.
Mm,
They're planning this, right? Okay, so you're talking about creating robots that have killing capability, weaponry, that will be deciding who to kill and who not to kill.
isn't that
Okay,
Terminator?
right? That's Terminator, right? That's like a Terminator situation, right? And no, I mean, now do you go as far as to say, is it self-perpetuating, and is it building more copies of itself, and is
Right.
it, I mean, no, I mean, you can get into the semantics of all that stuff. Of course, it's not Terminator, but the point is that this is opening the door. Like, they keep opening it further and further and further. And the whole point is, you can go all the way back to HAL in 2001, and Colossus, the Foreman Project, and looking at movies like Failsafe and all these things. I mean, these things were there to get us to think. They were supposed to be asking us questions. I think even Terminator did the same thing. It was a piece of entertainment,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of ideas in there that you would think people go, man, I don't know if we should do that.
Yeah.
And then people now are like, we should do that. What I mean? It's like, I don't get it. I don't get it. It doesn't. And now, on the positive, AI may be able to help us cure cancer, right? AI, it seems like it's going to be able to suss out how to communicate with whales and dolphins. I mean,
Mm.
they're along the path of being able to do that using artificial intelligence. There are some really, really cool things that AI could bring to our lives and solve a lot of problems and actually create a better world in some ways. The only problem that I see in the way is humanity, right? It's like, if I'm making sense,
No,
it's
you are, and it goes back to the original thing. It's the tool, or the tools that are not either good or evil. It's
Mhm.
people that use them. You know what I mean? It's what
Right,
the
exactly,
intent
and the way
behind.
that they choose to use, because there could be somebody who could say, just as in the same way that someone could try to say, okay, look, I don't know if you've ever seen this or not, but you can say to AI, hey, can you give me a hack that will allow me to help me write a hack that will let me break into someone's Wi-Fi system and get into their computer, and the AI will do it. It will if it has the right coding capability, it will code it for you, and you'll suddenly have a code that lets you hack Wi-Fi. Okay,
Wow.
that's just straight up real life. That's really happened, right? So you could have the same thing happen where someone says, okay, I want to help me cure cancer. Here, I'm going to feed all these cancer studies in here and all this data, and then the AI, with its super fast speed, is able to analyze hundreds of thousands of bits of data and reports and all this stuff and go, hey, I see a trend that a human mind could not see. Right. And then it says, I think the way to cure cancer is to do this. And it's this combination of these chemicals and this sort of thing and this sort of thing. And boom, we've got a cure for cancer. Could happen. Right. Same way you could say, hey, I want to create a virus that only kills people with brown hair. Okay. Right. Okay. And artificial intelligence will be like, oh, okay. And then, right. And then you put in all this information and data and someone could come up with something like that. It is really, really true. And the danger of this is if we don't put some sort of guardrails on it, those sorts of things could be happening. Right. And that's not me trying to be conspiracy guy. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm literally just talking about if you study this and you research it, this is the direction of some of the dangers. And then when you see people say, like, look, if you think about it, in the last year, you've had all these major AI researchers come together and say, we have to put a stop to this. We have to slow this down. The researchers, okay, the guy at Google who was part of the original creation of the algorithms that led to, ChatGPT and that sort of thing, he actually retired from Google so he could speak out about the dangers of it. Because he's like, this thing is doing stuff that I don't understand. These things are doing things that I can't get my head around, right? And I mean, so he's been working on this for over 40 years. And he quit so he could talk about it and warn everybody. Okay. Right. So the point is, all this information's out there, and it's really, really scary. And so I don't, like I said, I swear I don't want to come across as some conspiracy guy because I'm not that dude. I'm not into that. And I think you've known me for a few years.
No, I know you're not. I totally know you're not.
But it's like if you research this stuff and you're open-minded about it, you start to see there's some real concerns. And then what happens is, here, the one thing, last thing I want to say about it that I think sci-fi missed. If you think about 2001, you've got HAL, or Colossus, you've got, the Colossus, right? You've got Skynet in Terminator, right? The thing that I think they missed is it's not going to be like that. It's not going to just be one. What we have now is the Google AI versus the Microsoft AI versus the Meta AI versus the Chinese AI versus the Russian AI versus right? That's the part that I think is really fascinating. That like, what is that world going to be when you have all these different AIs with all? And the other thing is you hear about how corporations right now are all starting to race each other to see who can build the most powerful artificial intelligence. And then you say, hey, we got to put some moratorium on this and put some guardrails on it. Then the response is always, well, okay, if we do that, the Chinese aren't going to do that.
Right.
The Russians aren't going to do that. They're
not
going to
get outdone.
And we're going to get left out. So we have to do this, right? So it's like, well, what? Okay. So what's that world? What world are we creating? What happens when these things are like, hey, man, I need more energy than that one. The other one's like, no, I need the energy. You know what I mean? Like, what happens? What seriously, and then we're just these little things caught in the middle, and there's this war between these artificial massive intelligences. I mean, this is this kind of stuff as a sci-fi writer I think about,
it's interesting talking about it. I mean, a lot of times we'll say on the show, all roads lead to Star Trek. And I'm thinking in terms of Star Trek, I'm thinking of the ultimate computer, the M5, and how with Richard Daystrom, the one thing that he tried to build into it as a safeguard was about humanity and how M5 was thinking independent, but the one thing was you weren't to murder, you weren't to kill. In regards to what we're just discussing about where AI is now, there is no type of restriction.
Cool. But think about that. That's another story that was warning us about AI.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, Dr. Daystrom, in his brilliance, and I always felt that there was, I don't know about you, but I absolutely felt that there was a metaphor going on there for what I probably believe the actor himself was facing in terms of racism, right? Because when he talked in that scene where he talks about them laughing at him and talking behind his back and stuff, I felt like that was him talking. That was the actor talking, not just the character Daystrom. I felt that was very, I actually talked with Dorothy Fontana about that episode quite a bit when she and I hung out, and it was, it was really interesting. I don't know. My point is that that episode, what was happening with the M5? I mean, in a lot of ways, it was misbehaving because of the idiosyncrasies of Dr. Daystrom himself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? You know what I mean? So it's like that. I mean, that's part of this whole thing, right? It's like there was something that happened recently. you can look it up, in the last 5 years or so, these self-drive cars would not
Yes.
see people of color as people, and it would damn near hit them. And okay, and they're like, why is this thing like hitting black people, right? And then they looked into it. It's like, well, the guys who programmed it, they used white people as the guide for like, look for these look for this trait to avoid people, right? Now, I don't know that was overt racism. I'm not accusing them of that.
Right.
I think what happened is they were just like, oh yeah, we got to put this in there, and like, hey, I'll use my own picture.
Sure.
Right. I'll use my own. Hey, Bob, get in here. We got to use this. Got to scan this.
Right.
And I'm not accusing them of like, let's create this thing so it does that. What I'm saying is, it's just those kinds of oversights that could lead to who knows what in the next few years. That's what concerns me.
Yeah, something that's unintentional, but
completely unintentional.
but could have the ramifications, though,
Yeah,
and that's a simple example of that.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I know we've gotten into some interesting territory here, but you asked, so
Yeah, no, it's all good.
Yeah.
Hey, some of the other comments that came through. I just want to welcome Jeff Rubel's joining us. He's joining us from out west. Jeff, great to see you out there. Lou commented and he said, I had just turned 12 when Apollo 11 landed on the moon. I recall how little interest people had within the town where I lived when that took place. Randy said, I am in the tech field and am quite vested with AI. It is intimidating. Yep.
Yeah.
He also said, I'm also teaching kids cybersecurity skills. Their capacity around using advanced technology is equally impressive.
Cool.
And also he added, AI has the potential to automate tasks, leading to concerns about job displacement. However, it also creates new job opportunities and can augment human capabilities in various fields. This response was created by AI, about AI. I think that's
well. Okay, let's take a second on that. I want to pause there.
Sure.
One of the things that I think about is, I'll give you an example. Apollo astronaut just passed away.
I know.
And for some reason, we're way off into this direction talking here, and I'm spacing out. My goodness. Oh my gosh, what is wrong with me? Frank Borman. My gosh, my brain's way off. Frank Borman passed away. And I go online because I wanted to do a little tribute to Frank Borman, because he's one of the astronauts I thought was super cool, because he led like the investigation into the Apollo 1 fire. He was a super thorough, like Neil Armstrong said he was the best pilot he ever knew, Frank Borman and stuff. He's a super smart guy. So I go online and I'm like I type in Frank Borman, astronaut. And all of a sudden I come across a bunch of images of AI created images of this guy. And it's not him. And they're everywhere. There are tons of images, dozens of images of Frank Borman that are not Frank Borman, that somebody made with AI art. I have no idea how or why they did this, right? But then I started thinking about all these issues with misinformation, and how people could see that and think that's Frank Borman, and it wasn't him, right? I mean, I think about what, especially being a writer and artist. I mean, a big part of what was happening with this SAG strike and the writer's strike had to do with people being replaced with artificial intelligence.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
it's the part that kills me with all this is I feel like we haven't ever even figured out the human thing yet. We haven't even gotten good as humans yet. You know what I mean? To our full capability. Then we're going to add this other thing. It's interesting. There's something, I don't know if you ever saw a show called The Social Dilemma on Netflix.
No.
Fantastic show. And it's by these two tech guys who did a big analysis of how social media was impacting and addicting people, right? It really explains the dangers of social media. Well, those guys did something that came out in March. It was called March or April. It's called the AI Dilemma. And they had a talk which really broke this whole thing down. I highly recommend taking a look at that. It's kind of like a TED Talk sort of thing. Yep. And they really break down and start explaining this stuff. And you begin to see how dangerous a lot of this is. And you look at the fact that social media, for example, has ended up being a pretty negative thing for humanity. And it's been positive in that it's allowed people like us to meet, right? Or us to connect with all these people who we never would have thought we would know or work with. Fantastic. I would never want to miss out on that. But then there's this other side of it where you have, teenagers wanting to kill themselves because they're, You know what I mean? Right. I mean, you see what I'm saying? Like there's this devastating side to this, right? That is really, really quite awful. And it's because we never put enough guardrails on it. We never really thought it through when we did it. So get off my soapbox on this. Let's go on to something else. But it's quite an issue. It's quite an issue.
No, totally agree.
When you talk about the next 25 to 50 years, you have to talk about this as being a factor in it. You have to, you know. Yeah.
It's going to be, I mean, 50 years from now, but I mean, for those of us who are around, 50 years, it'll be interesting to look back on the last 50 years at that point in time. One last thing, Randy said the character of Dr. Daystrom, who imbues the M5 with aspects of his own psyche, touches on the intersection of AI and mental health, particularly how personal issues can impact technological development. More from AI on AI.
Thanks, AI. We really appreciate it. It's really great, AI.
Oh boy.
It's like, and the part that's scary is that, okay, here's one I want to talk about is how many average Americans could even create that statement that AI just put together. Do you see what I'm saying? Right. Yeah. Just having the ability to actually think things through like that and actually put it together in a comprehensible, format using English properly and do it. I'm like, dude, I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, so it was interesting. And I saw what I think it was Lee who said that earlier about the lack of interest in the Apollo program. And that's actually the same thing that I went through growing up as a child. That's actually part of what deterred me away from wanting to be an astronaut and wanting to become a creator of media was I was like, I have to find a way to grow up to create stories that are going to inspire us to get back on the course that we should be on, And one of the things that really saddens me is when I create science fiction stories about the future, and I'm trying to create hard sci-fi stories that also have some sort of a foundation in history or looking at geopolitics or what like to me I think it's smart to go, if I'm going to tell a story that's set 50 years from now, I have to come up with some sort of projection of what I think the next 50 years will be like, right? It just seems like a logical way to do it instead of just going, yeah man, it's in the future, so they got like flying cars, and it's like right, okay, I get that, but like how do we get there? How did that happen? And I think that's a big part of the storytelling process. And I guess, I lost my train of thought. I guess where I was going is, okay, what I was going to say is what saddens me is whenever I try to think of like, how do we create a spacefaring civilization or how do we get to another star? It's really hard to think of a story that's like, well, we went to another star because all of humanity kind of got together, worked through their problems and everything and said, let's apply our resources to this and let's go to another star. That's the story I wish I could tell. It's just like my underwater city story, right? Oceanus. I actually, I didn't really want to tell a story about a disaster, but it was like, well, what's going to hook everyday people to watch a story about an underwater city, right? It's like, right? It's like, well, you kind of do something that wakes them up and gets people like, oh man, it's really cool. It's an underwater city, but they're in danger. You know what I mean? But, it's like, I'm like, I just watch a show about an underwater city. I really just like, what's it like to live in an underwater city? That to me, that could be super fascinating, without having disasters in it. So I go through the same thing when I do space stories. Now it's like, what's the motivator? How do we get there? Why does this happen? What's making them go? What's allowing them to go? Now it's kind of like, well, there are these two rich guys and there's this other rich guy and they all are kind of competing, I mean, that's, right? I mean, that seems even For All Mankind's doing that sort of thing, in it,
Well, so. It's almost like the conflict is what is the hook, so to speak.
Right.
That's what draws the people in. One thing though, like, just touching upon Star Trek, and I'm talking about the original series, we knew that it was taking place in the future. So it's almost like they could get away with it with that aspect of it because we didn't know how far into the future, because obviously when the movies came out, then I think they started indicating it was either like the 23rd century, and we knew that it was hundreds of years. But with there being no time frame, so many different things could have progressed to allow us to be to allow the Federation to be where it was because that time.
I'm going to throw something at you though. I think part of why Roddenberry and people could create that optimistic version of the 23rd century was because if you looked at where we were at the time and what was accomplished, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it was like, well, we're going to the moon now and we're aggressively doing these things. Why wouldn't we eventually in 300 years be able to have the Starship Enterprise? It just made
Right.
sense, right? It's the same thing as like when people laugh and make fun of Jerry Anderson's UFO set in 1980.
Yep.
Well, I mean, if you really could have kept the pedal to the metal from what was going on back in the late 60s, you could
Yeah.
have had a 1980 like that. Absolutely. Just like you could have had a 1999 like in the show, right? I mean, those are all optimistic. And I'm going to posit that part of why the new Star Treks are so dark is because we actually are in a very dark time in a way. So I don't think that the writers really know how to say, well, how do I create this future, where it's really optimistic and beautiful and everything worked out and things are great? It's like, well, I don't think they even think about that, because if they're coming from today's society and they say, well, what would the 23rd, 24th century look like from today?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I even remember like when the first season of Picard, which I really, really didn't personally care for, part of where I remember Patrick Stewart talking about, I feel personally so negative about what's happening around the world politically and all these bad things happening, all this stuff. So let's go make a new Star Trek that's about the Federation falling apart and being terrible.
Dark.
You see what I'm saying? So it's like, I would have had the exact opposite thought. I would have been like, how do I create a story instead of saying, hey, we're having this social upheaval right now and all this political strife. So let's go make a Star Trek that's based upon how terrible things are right now. I would have said, how do we make a Star Trek that's about keeping it Star Trek? You know what I mean? Keeping, right, staying positive and optimistic, and maybe there are some forces that are coming in, but we got to stay. We're not going to get dark because of this. We're going to stay light.
Even with the Star Trek of the 60s, there was a lot of different things that were going on in the world, and instead of taking the negative, I mean, it was almost like we've learned from our mistakes. We don't do these things that we used to do, and we've gotten beyond that. So, I mean, and then he would incorporate these into stories and to get around the censors and, outline it as being science fiction. But I mean, an immediate thought that comes to mind is A Private Little War, in regards to everything that was going on with the Korean War that was taking place. So that was, as far as the non-interference directive and the balance of power. And it was just a way of kind of dealing with it, but it was a way of dealing with it in the sense that we've learned from our mistakes and we're not going in that direction. And again, the one episode that which is, I'm not a big third season fan. There's probably, like, out of the 24 episodes, I'd say there's probably maybe 14 out of the 24 that I really enjoy. But the one with Frank Gorshin and Lou Antonio.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Let that be your last battlefield. I mean, the way it was presented, I think we've even talked about this before. It's just like the way, how about prejudice. And it's like, when he's, saying why he's against, Beale's race, because, they're black on the left and white on the right, where his people are white on the left and black on the right. It's like, what the heck? Why?
This is insane.
I mean,
from the outside, it's insane. From the outside, it's insane. It's like, what are you talking about, right? It's the same thing as, and honestly, brilliant. I mean, I've been incredibly disappointed watching some of the stuff that's been happening culturally right now with this resurgence of all this sort of, personally, I believe we should be heading toward a society where people are just people, and we're all just moving forward. And what we're seeing is all this polarization and all this stuff, and a lot of it's happening from people about themselves, right? It's like this thing. I don't get it. I don't understand. It's like that. The whole fight was for us all to get along, for us all to be, people and just people, right? And to have this thing now of this identity politics where everybody's polarizing and going, well, I'm this and I'm this and that, and you got to respect this because I'm this. It's like, that's crazy. If you came at this, if you're an alien and you came at it from the outside, you'd say there's something really wrong with this species. It just doesn't make any sense. They're all stuck on the same ecosystem with this fragile atmosphere and this fragile, amount of resources, and they're sitting there coming up with reasons to fight each other. It's
what, that's a great analogy. So what you were just saying, it's in regards to like watching that episode, it's almost like we're the aliens watching the Earth in regards to that specific episode. As the viewer, we're the aliens, and we're seeing what's being discussed, and we're thinking, what the heck? to your point, if there was an alien culture that was, maybe doing some kind of reconnaissance or doing like a first contact, so to speak,
Mhm.
they
Mhm.
would probably be really like, wow, talk about not being, being very primitive and, having the psychology that's so backward in so many
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
John's joining us. John, welcome. He's saying there will always need to be people who make the discoveries and those who make us want to continue to explore. We need to keep looking for the next great why. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, very
Mhm.
true.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so getting into Persephone, and
Mhm.
now thanks again. I mean, I know we went off a little bit, but it's always great to have these conversations with you, Jeffrey.
Sure.
One thing I did not realize, and I think thinking back, and it's been about 7 years, that now I'm going to say Alpha Centauri is something that always stuck with me just because of Lost in Space. I mean, it's the
Mhm.
nearest
Yeah.
star. It's something
Yeah.
that it's always been in the back of my mind, and
Mhm.
and it's interesting too. I didn't do the research, in regards to how that all fits, and I'm talking about as far as growing up and the nearest star, and it was just that reference in 2016. It was, I guess, scientists actually discovered more about this area
Mhm.
of these stars. Now there's two stars, if I'm not mistaken, right? There's,
3.
or
There are
excuse
3.
me, three. There's
Yeah,
the
3.
two,
Yeah, there's Alpha Centauri A and B, and
and then
then
Proxima,
there's Proxima
right?
Centauri. And Alpha Centauri A and B are larger, like main sequences. They're similar to our sun. They're closer to our sun, and then about I think it's like 14,000 AUs away. That is Proxima. It orbits the other two stars, right? So those two stars orbit each other, and then Proxima orbits them. So it's a pretty crazy gravitational dance and all the stuff that's going on there. But yes, Proxima has it has at least 2 planets, maybe 3, and one of them, B, sits in what would be considered the Goldilocks zone of that red dwarf star, and it's a red dwarf star, so it's not like our sun. It's much cooler. It's way smaller, but it also it has really severe solar radiation. It has a lot of solar flares that come off of it, and everything. They're very, you know, super intense. So um, this planet, they think it's slightly larger than the Earth, rocky, and it orbits in a zone where liquid water could exist on its surface. And the other thing is it also they believe it's tidally locked, which means that one side of this planet always faces the star, and the other side always faces away, kind of the way our moon orbits the Earth, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so so it's a pretty fascinating place conceptually, and so when I heard about that, because I, like you, I remember hearing about Alpha Centauri as a kid, and I was always like, "That's awesome," and I always thought it was really, really cool that there was this nearest star system, and I was always like, "What?" Well, it was also The Day After Tomorrow, which was the Jerry Anderson show.
Yes.
That was Into Infinity. That had the target being Alpha Centauri. So, I remember being in 6th grade going, "Well, we got to go to Alpha Centauri." It's like,
Right.
this is called Alpha Centauri, which sounds really cool. So you know what I mean? So it's like I was really interested. So when I heard about the idea that there was a planet orbiting there, I was like, you know what? I want to tell a story about this. I've got to tell a story about going there. And there were several things that I knew I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to tell a story about a very small number, a group of astronauts who had different backgrounds and perspectives that were all forced into an emergency mission to the planet, and then once they were there, they were going to discover something. That was the kind of basis of the story for me, because I didn't want to spend a bunch of time on a ship or on a bunch of stuff. It was like, I just want to kind of get down to a planet and deal with the story there. And the other thing too is I was also trying to figure out something that was cost effective to
Yep.
produce. That so I'm not trying to make Star Wars or make something that's I'm not trying to make a $200 million movie. I know being early in my career as a director, I was not going to be able to have huge budgets, so I wanted to create something that was going to be cost effective to shoot. So I came up with the idea of this ship that's a colony ship, and that had new drive systems that allowed them to get to Alpha Centauri in about 5 to 6 decades. And then the idea was going to be that through the advent of hibernation, suspended animation technologies, you could have colonists on board who were frozen, and so you could say the resources. But then I thought, I wouldn't trust that to be. I wouldn't just trust an AI or trust a computer system not to break down or have a problem for 5 decades, right? So I thought it'd be interesting if they had a crew that would rotate and go in and out of hibernation, and everything. And I thought, well, what if somebody kind of violates the protocols and accidentally has kids during that, right? And I thought, okay, so you had a couple of these kids that were born on the ship before the captain puts his foot down and says, we're not going to have more kids on the ship. But I thought it would be kind of interesting if you had a few of those kids, and those kids learned to be pilots, learned to kind of understand, and they all had a dream of, I can't wait to get to Proxima B. That's when I'm not from Earth. Earth is a legend to me. Earth is something you read about in the history books, or that the AI system, Omni, I call it, Omni told us about Earth, right, as children, but we're never going to set foot on it. This is a one-way mission, right? And then I thought, well, what if those kids are then saddled with somebody who is from Earth, who has been awakened by the emergency situation they're in, and it's like, well, you kids and this person, you guys have to go down to this planet. Okay, so then if those people go and they land on a planet, and then they discover something that none of them expected to be there, everybody's going to have a completely different reaction to it. And I wanted to get into that and get into the conflicts that would ensue while they were all still struggling to survive, and try to understand what this mystery is and unravel it, because there's a ticking clock, because the ship is coming and it's got to get there. And it's like, this mystery is really important. If we don't solve it, we may not have a colony, and maybe we shouldn't have a colony based on what we've discovered. That's another thing that happens. So, yeah.
No, that makes for wonderful storytelling, and it's not dealing with, let's say, like you said, it doesn't have to be the aliens of the week type of story, and there's a lot of motivation, and the fact that it's human drama, it's human conflict.
Yeah, that's to me, I love 2001: A Space Odyssey, but I also understand why, for many people watching that film, it's kind of more of a tour of the future than it is an actual, how do I explain it? It's not a narrative movie until you really get to the part with Hal, the discovery, right? And otherwise it's sort of this like visual journey, and you're going on this journey, right? And then it really becomes a movie and locks in right during that kind of third act, right, with Hal and everything. But then it goes from there into this, like, I think for average people, like, I don't even know what I'm watching, right? We've got, all these
very
lights and all this stuff going on. And then all of a sudden we're in a hotel room and he's an old man, and I don't get it. And now he's a baby, it's, I can understand how the metaphysical aspect of that, it's quite a journey. I think it's an amazing film, but I do understand, why some people can't relate to it. So my dream with Persephone is that I want to make it the 2001 of the 21st century. That's really my dream, is to make a movie that has really cool spaceships in it, really cool characters in it, a really cool circumstance, but that has a really neat action adventure story, with danger and peril in it, but without getting into the trappings of where we have to have, space battles and gunfights and monsters and like all those tropes that I think personally are getting really tired. We've just seen it over and over and over and over and over again. And Persephone's not about any of those things. So
no, and unfortunately, those types of ideas for filmmaking, I mean, when it was done on a certain level, it definitely worked, but it's almost gotten to the point, what can we create that's going to be that much more darker, or it's almost like you're trying to outdo each movie, because it's like, what can be more shocking than the last? You know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. So
I totally agree. And so much about movies. You know more about movies than I do. And it's like you have so much of a background and dearth. You got all this knowledge. You know so much about it. And I don't know about you, But for me, I'm just getting to the place where it's like, it was just like watching the latest Mission Impossible trailer. I didn't ever watch the film because I just wasn't that interested. And I'll tell you what, it's not like I didn't enjoy Mission Impossible. I did like some of those Mission Impossible films. I thought they were cool. But I see the new trailer last summer or last year, earlier this year, whenever it was, and I'm like, okay, Tom Cruise is running. I'm like, okay, and then Tom Cruise is on a motorcycle. Okay, Tom Cruise is on a train. But Tom Cruise is having a big fist fight with these guys. Here's a villain saying this is really, really serious. And you know what I mean? It's like, I just feel like we've seen it all so many times over and over and over and over again. Look at what just happened with this new Marvel movie. It has had the worst opening of any of the Marvel films they've ever had, right? I really think that audiences are getting tired of this. Yeah. And the problem is, and Mission Impossible didn't do as well as they hoped it would, right? And I guess the point I'm trying to get at is maybe it's time to do something else. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's time to try something else. Maybe it's trying to, you know what I mean? Instead of just saying, like, I keep watching these movies and going, we're just going to keep doing this over and over and over again. It's like, how about we do something else? So
what's really
go ahead.
I was just going to say, what's very interesting is once something else is done, and I'm hoping that this is going to be one of those films that is going to be that, Jeffrey. Yeah. And it's a success, then what's going to happen is there's going to be a shift. There'll be a shift in Hollywood. There'll be a shift with the movie making that, okay, well, this is working. This is getting the attention that is needed. And then what's going to happen is a lot of filmmakers are going to jump in on that bandwagon.
I actually think there are filmmakers out there that want to do different things. I think they can't get them sold or financed. I think that's part of it, right? I think that we live in a system right now where they literally are like, they've lost the creativity. There's no creativity. It's like a cookie cutter thing of a formula. It's like, well, how many explosions are going to be in this movie? How many, okay, we got to have like a chase, explosions, a fist fight, a sex scene, you know what I mean? It's like you have this combo and you say, well, how many of those things are we going to have? Well, does this have that? Does this have this, and this? Is it based upon an old thing, something else that people have seen before? Was it a book? That's the stuff that they're deciding it. They're not going, hey, is this like creative and original and something that audiences will resonate with, Or maybe audiences don't even know they'll resonate with it. Maybe we need to take a risk and try something new, It's creatively bankrupt. So it's really difficult I just can't imagine all the thousands of talented people out there with stories and ideas that can't get them across the finish line right now. Can't even get them out there, so.
Very frustrating. And I think once the numbers start dropping, as they have been, I think that's where the door is going to open to have different ideas and different concepts for movie making be accepted or even allowed, or even maybe in their eyes, maybe a gamble. Because if what they thought was working and it is not, and it's not profitable, that's going to be the decision maker. But it's so frustrating.
Yeah. Well, and again, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm actually doing something about it. I'm trying to make the kind of movie that I want to watch. Yeah, that's part of it for me, right? It's like I'm fine that those movies exist. People can go see them all they want. If they want to see Fast and the Furious 18, go ahead. I don't want to, it's not interesting to me. It's like I don't, it's kind of like I can't. There's only so many car chases that you know what I mean? Or even space battles. It was funny, like just watching this Ahsoka show. I every time they had a space battle on there, I was just kind of like, I was like, oh, okay. Because I knew the characters weren't going to get, I knew that they wouldn't get killed, right? Think about this. When you go back to A New Hope, watching that back in 77, I didn't know they were going to make it out of that TIE fighter when they escaped the Death Star. I didn't know if they were going to make it. When we had the Death Star, the fight in the trench, and everything, I thought they were lost. I thought it was going to work. I remember the first time I watched that, I was like, oh my gosh. And then when Han Solo shows up, it's like, oh, thank goodness, and then, blow this thing, kid, so we can all go home. It's like, it's, you know what I mean? It was something, that was awesome. It was awesome. And it was cool. Then the next movie, it's like, oh, now we're doing this in an asteroid field. Well, I don't know if they're going to make it. Well, you know what I mean? That was really exciting. And then, but then, okay, Return of the Jedi. I was like, wait a minute, there's a Death Star? Well, wasn't there already a Death Star? And then it's like, yeah, but this time they're going to fly into it. It's like, okay, yeah, all right, that's cool. You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to put it down, but you know what I mean? It's like you can start to see the trajectory that, right? You can see a pattern. You can start to see how it led us here. You can start to see the trajectory of all this stuff that's happened with filmmaking. It's really interesting. And I know there are new ideas out there. Think about all these amazing books that we've read over the years. And the fact that these books, you can actually make them into movies now. There were things, the technology didn't exist to make things like Ringworld, the Larry Niven book, or Rendezvous with Rama, things like that. That stuff could get made now. The technology exists to do it and everything, right? But the problem, what worries me is that they wouldn't want to make Rendezvous with Rama the way it is because it wasn't about, people fist fighting and blowing stuff up. And, you know what I mean? It was like, well, there's this alien artifact and we're going to go inside and explore it. Sounds good to me. I can watch that. That sounds like a cool movie,
Well, and the problem is all movies don't have to be alike. I mean, you can have diversity. There's nothing wrong with
That's all I'm saying. Yeah, that's all I'm saying. And again, it's not that I don't like space battles. I actually do like space battles. It's just that where they are now, I just don't care. You know what I mean? That's all it is, Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of this stuff, unfortunately, has become very predictable.
Yeah, it's so predictable. It's just like watching these lightsaber fights they just had in these shows. It's like, well, I know nothing's going to happen. I know what's going, you know what I mean? I know it's going to be fine. I know it's going to be okay. It doesn't matter. It's just the same old stuff. You know what I mean? And so, and I think, another part of it, and I'll again back off this topic, but I think part of the problem is we're so saturated with all of it.
Yeah.
Right? It's like if they were just more judicious and said, you know what, we don't have to put out so much. We don't have to be so greedy that we're putting out 15 shows and all these movies and all this stuff. It's like, how about we just put our effort into making a really good movie once a decade? Could you imagine that? And we really make a great movie with a really good story and really, you know what I mean? Instead of going, hey, you know what, we're going to do this and we're going to try to make as much money as we can. How do we start making more of these? We got to make more of these things.
I think you summed it up. It's the greed factor. That's what it is. It's there is no more, or really it doesn't happen too much where there's lightning in a bottle, where something like Star Wars was lightning in a bottle, the way it
couldn't even happen now. It couldn't even happen now because they would say, I would tell you, the studios would go, well, who's this Harrison Ford? Like Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, I've never heard of him.
Right.
I can't give you money for this. That's what they would do. I'm telling you right now, that's literally what the studios would do. So
it's a product of its time. So
yeah, someone took a risk.
Yeah.
Randy
said, great conversation. John was agreeing about what we were just discussing. Jeff, I predict many more.
We need more Death Stars. I think, but this time we have to blow up the Death Star. This time we're going to, I don't know. We have to send a team inside to place charges to blow it up or something. I don't know. Yeah.
No, there was something exciting. I think we were talking about this a while ago. I mean, back in the day, Starlog magazine, I remember when they had mentioned that, now this is when literally Star Wars was out, but there was this indication that Lucas had this outline of different stories.
Yeah.
And the whole thing was about how Vader came to be. And it was that they fought at this at a volcano. And then what happened was he fell in and then he was scarred. And then that's how he became Darth Vader. Mm-hmm. And, that anticipation of wondering how it could have been and what it was going to be like. And maybe would there be other movies that were going to take place after, even later? I mean, again, this was only when Star Wars was out. And when you think about how everything came to be and how it all morphed, they went back and they did 1, 2, and 3. But then by the time 7, 8, and 9 came out, it was like just such a major disappointment. Was it great seeing some of these familiar faces? Absolutely. But as far as the story and
I'm gonna say that 1, 2, and 3, when I watched A New Hope, right, when it was just Star Wars.
Yes.
Right. When I saw Star Wars, when when I met your father, he was the greatest, like when I heard things like that, right? I was like, whoa, that sounds really cool, right? Okay. Do you think what we saw in episode 1 reflected what that conversation was?
No, not at all.
And like, we fought in the Clone Wars. Whoa, that sounds interesting. What's that? Well,
Right.
that thing that I saw in those prequels was not what I had in my head with any of the stuff that he was talking about in that film as far as the backstory. So when he talked about what the backstory was going to be, which sounded really awesome, by the way, right? It sounded super cool, but there's no possible way that I thought that, Anakin was going to be, well, first off, I didn't even know, they didn't even mention Anakin. It was just your father. That's what he called me, your father, right? But that his father, and in my head, I saw Obi-Wan being some dude in his 20s, probably late 20s, who's this badass with a badass, Darth Vader, and they're both super cool and they're just doing their thing. That's what I thought. And they were fighting in this war. That's what I imagined in my head, right? In the Clone Wars, I had all kinds of thoughts of what that was, right? And I'll just say that what it turned out to be in the prequels, I was like, what? Like, what is this? And so Anakin Skywalker is a little kid who makes C-3PO.
Yeah. Where did that come from?
Where did that come from? He made C-3PO, right? And then I don't even know where to go, man. I don't even know what to say. It's just all so like.
The only thing I like, Jeffrey, from those 3 movies, honestly, was, and I'll truth be told, is just I like the lightsaber battles. I mean, that's what I mean. And at the end of the first movie, the end of the second,
the Darth Maul battle was awesome. That was fantastic.
In regards to my favorite part of that film, probably it was that last 15 or 20 minutes of it. The rest of it, I went back and actually saw that film with my father-in-law, and I think I fell asleep through part of it, going back to rewatch it because I was just so bored by it. And and when you think about the buildup for these movies or what it could have been when we were kids, to your point, you have these ideas in the back of your mind, and you're thinking about it on a subconscious level too, because you're just kind of like, it's like when you read a book, you're reading it, and the words that are in, the dialogue and the narrative that's being expressed by the authors, you're creating that in your mind,
right?
Now, to your point, what you just described.
Well, I mean, I could whiteboard for you the thought process I went through, because I had this sort of prototypical writer in me back between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, right? And I remember all these things that they would talk about, this whole idea of like when you just see these breadcrumbs that were never followed between those 2 films, like when Obi-Wan says, this is a dangerous time for you. You could be tempted by the dark side. And also, if you go do this, I can't help you. Okay. Right. To me, that led to the fact clearly Luke something dark was going to happen with Luke, because he didn't listen to them. Right. That didn't happen. That didn't ever happen. The other thing, that boy's our last hope. No, there's another. Okay. But then that didn't play out into anything. It didn't become anything. It's like, it just became so it's like, I really do. The sad part is like when people start critiquing where we are now, and this whole idea of product, and this whole idea of this almost bankrupt creative thing where there's not a lot going right. It actually started way back then. It didn't just start now. I would actually postulate that it started with like Return of the Jedi. I mean, it was clearly like, we want to make money off of this. We're gonna make these Ewok things because we want to appeal to kids, and we want to have some toys, and we want to have. I mean, you can read about it. They were doing that. They were making that decision. And I like, if you think about it, the story that was set up in The Empire Strikes Back versus the story of what we got with Return of the Jedi, I think Return of the Jedi could have been really dark, super intense movie. That could have been super intense, and it I remember going, okay. I mean, obviously, I enjoyed seeing it, and I enjoyed the visual effects and all the stuff and everything, and seeing those characters again. But it didn't play out narratively like what I would have hoped, And so
it was a letdown for me personally too.
Yeah, it just wasn't. I mean, and again, it's like, I'm not trying to demand or expect anything from the writers other than what they set me up for. Right? Does that make sense?
It does. Totally. I've seen some comments coming through. Oh, Suzanne. Hey, Suzanne. Suzanne is joining us from the UK. She's saying she just got back from Italy from the Space 1999 convention.
Oh, wonderful.
So welcome. Welcome, Suzanne. And it's got to be late over there too right now in the UK. And I hope you had a nice trip back too on the flight. Thanks for joining. Randy commented, so I just asked AI, creating a new version of the classic Star Wars story with another Death Star reimagining the plot while retaining the essence of the original series. Here's a fresh take, and it wrote me a 3-act story. Oh boy.
Oh my gosh.
May commented, and she
Do they
said,
have Death Stars in it? Right.
She said, anytime someone comes up with something creative and original, they ruin it by running it out too many sequels. By the time the sequels are in double digits, it isn't creative and original anymore. So true. Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. One last thing. Yeah. In regards to Jedi, to me, that was just it was a merchandising ploy, really.
That's what it felt like. It just did. And you also had things where like that idea of like a snake eating its own tail. It felt like okay, so when you had things like dialogue where we're referencing dialogue from the other two movies, you know, right? It was like, you know what I mean? It's like we're only on the third movie, folks. We don't need to reference. It's not like there's nostalgia. You know, I mean, I know there's nostalgia already, but even the scene where like R2 and C-3PO, cross the forest, and it's just a replication of the scene on the blockade runner in the beginning, or saying I've got a bad feeling about this and saying all this. It's like, I mean, come on, it's just it's sort of, you know what I mean? It's sort of like it was eating itself already. Going back,
well, it's playing it safe. It's banking on what originally was, original. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it's really interesting. But anyway, we can sit here and analyze these things and put them to. But I say this stuff as somebody who is a filmmaker, is a writer, and I always feel like we could do so much better if we just chose to. Right? I mean, it's just. But this applies to things we were talking about way back in the beginning of the conversation. It's all connected. So.
Well, one of the things I'd like to do is I'd just like to share some of the concept art that we have that you shared from Persephone, and it's pretty cool.
Sure.
So I'm going to bring this on the screen. Can you see that? Okay. Just want to make sure if you can see it, everybody else can see it.
Yeah.
Okay. So really, really cool. Now, the Astro Bug and the Terracat, very, very neat.
Yeah, these are ships that so I did the production design for this, and my whole goal with this was to create a really cool futuristic world that feels believable, that feels like an extension of the technology that's happening right now, but projects it to the end of this century and forward. But it still has the trappings of real physics, and you've got attitude thrusters, and nuclear rockets, chemical rockets, all these kinds of things that it's not magic. It's we're trying to create stuff that would really happen. I was saying earlier on Todd's podcast when I was on with him that the Terracat, when I designed that rover, there's an homage in that rover to the Mattel Eagle, and I don't know if you can see it or not.
I'm thinking the really like the nose cone.
It's the nose cone. It's that piece of plastic that you could flap up to put the So that was my my homage to it in this.
Very nice.
Yeah.
It's very sleek.
And then the Aerofox is the primary vehicle that's in the majority of the movie.
Yeah.
So
very cool. Now, Jeffrey, how long did it take you to design these?
Well, I actually started the design process when I began the initial version of the script, which I've actually been working on this project since 2017. So a lot of the design work was put together in like the first 12 to 18 months of the project. So we did a lot of it then. So it's been through different permutations. I've had to rewrite the script a bunch of times, but I think the version we have right now is the best iteration of it, and I feel really good about it. So
that's awesome.
Yep.
And the costumes for the space.
Some concept art we did with Brianna Hildebrand, who's currently signed to be in the film.
And the geoglyphs.
Yep. Yeah. Did you read the script? Did I get you the script?
You did get me the script. I have not read through the
Okay.
entire thing yet, so I'm very much looking forward to it, especially with having all this background information in our discussion.
Hmm.
So it's looking pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, I definitely try to have a vision for what I want the film to look like, and as you can see here, there's a lot of the storyboards that we've created and concept art and stuff. So it's definitely a world. There's a yeah.
Now, as far as I'm gonna go back on stop sharing for a moment and give me 1 second. You were just mentioning the in regards to Brianna Hildebrandt. Let me just get this up here real quick.
Hmm.
In regards to the cast, so the individuals that you have, and I don't want to butcher their names, so but they really have really impressive credentials as far as what they've done in the world of entertainment and acting. So
Yeah.
it's and the fact that they're signed on for this is pretty significant as well.
Yeah, it is. It is. Unfortunately, it's very sad because from a studio standpoint, they have not been enough to move the needle for me to easily get the financing. It's been really something. Like I've had studios say, "Well, Ming Na Wen, yeah, she's a good actor, but she's not going to drive box office." And that's how the studios look at this stuff at this point.
Mhm.
And these people all believe in my script. They've all read the script. They all love the project, and they've all signed on. So
Right.
I have some European financing, and I think I'm going to end up producing this entirely independently that way. So we're either going to shoot this in Munich or Utah at this point. One of
Oh,
those.
okay.
Yeah. Hmm.
Very cool. And you were
Yeah.
talking about just we were just talking about Mission Impossible,
Hmm.
and is it does he pronounce his
Isa.
first Isa?
Isa.
Yeah, Morales. He was in
Yeah,
the
he's in. Yeah, he's the villain in that. Yep.
yeah, very very cool.
Mhm.
And then a lot of folks may know Brandon Hildebrandt. She was in the Deadpool movies as well.
Yep.
So very very cool.
Hmm.
And then also Ming Na Wen for what Mulan she did, and then
Oh
also
yeah, but she was in.
the Book of
Gosh.
Boba Fett.
Yeah, Book of Boba Fett, Ages of Shield.
Yep.
She's been around. People.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
So again, very very impressive.
Hmm.
And then in regards to the music, I'm just going to jump ahead too. Jeff Rona.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Jeff did the music for Oceanus and Parallel Man, my other two films. So yeah, he's amazing. Good friend of mine.
Yeah, and actually, I think I had the opportunity to meet him when we met in New York City.
That's right. Yeah, he was in New York at the same time we were. Yeah, I was there.
Yeah,
Yep.
really nice guy.
Yep.
So now, in regards to your hopes in regards to the movie, and then
Hmm.
we'll switch over to the novelization.
Hmm.
You're hoping for maybe potentially a 2025 release.
My goal is for this to be in production by like this time next year. I'll be hopefully knee deep in production for this film.
Gotcha.
So we've already got props and sets moving at Pinewood Studios. The same people I'm working with there in London at Macanarum, they're building all my sets and props for this film, which we're going to ship to wherever our final destination is for producing the film. So, which is great. So we've already got that stuff underway. We started that, I don't know, quite a while ago, kind of right before COVID hit.
Okay.
This was on track to get made, and then COVID hit, and it really derailed it. So that was part of it. So then we had to kind of regroup and rethink it, and so it's been the victim of a few of these, unfortunate circumstances along the way, but it's looking good. We'll get it done. So,
Awesome.
yeah. Hmm.
Well, and then again with COVID and everything, I mean it really derailed a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But now, in regards to the big news that's just occurred, there was a Kickstarter that was put into place, and it's actually still underway for the next couple of days. But tell us a little bit more about that in
Sure.
regards to.
Well, one of the things we did, we took an earlier draft of my script, and actually Kevin Anderson and I took a look at it together, and he gave me some notes. He's one of my favorite authors, and it was like we met through a mutual friend, and he and I really hit it off. We like same music and same, so many things, right? And I had read a bunch of his Dune books, and he actually wrote this book called The Last Days of Krypton, which was the story of like what happens with Jor-El and everything leading up to him sending his baby into space, right? It's a fantastic book, and I had read that, I don't know, mid early 2000s. And I was like, God, this is so good. So then when I finally got to meet Kevin, I was like, well, that's the guy that's written all these books that I like, right? And I'd read probably, I don't know, 12 of his Dune prequels that he did with Brian Herbert. And I was just a huge fan. So he and I hit it off, and we talked about it, and I was like, well, what if we made a book? And so he, while I was working on the scripts and stuff, he wrote this and everything based upon my script. So, which is really cool. So it's been a huge honor to work with him on this. And yeah, we've had a really positive response to this. So it's already funded and it's coming. It's going to happen. I would ask that everybody on this, if we could, we really want this to blow up and be an even bigger success. I'd love for people to read, this sort of prototypical version of the story. So we'd love to, if you, I don't know if you can put the link to the Kickstarter, but it's still there for a couple more days and everything. So, and we have some really cool rewards, and you can get the book, you can get a leather-bound book version, I'm going to be reading an audiobook version of it. There's going to be some cool stuff happening. So
yeah, no, I'll repost the Kickstarter into the link too after the show, definitely. So yeah. And again, and it's been doing very, very successful in regards to that. So and then just a little bit more information about that. And that'll be coming out then when? That'll be sometime next year then, right? In regards to the once the Kickstarter.
Yeah, the book will be coming out sometime in 24. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So cool.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have a lot of great projects going on, Jeffrey, and then of course, with the Eagle documentary, that's
Yeah, we can give a quick update on that. Just greenlit the construction of the Eagle command module and everything. We're building that full scale interior at Pinewood, and we start on that on Monday. And I'll be actually going over to London next Sunday, and I'll be over there for a few days working with them and supervising that construction. And then our plan is to actually shoot with Nick. I'm planning to do a really cool nostalgic interview with him inside the Eagle. He'll be in an Eagle for the first time in 50 years. It's going to be really cool. So yeah, and so that's the plan with that. So
gotcha.
So, yeah. So that'll be in mid-December. We'll be doing that shoot in London, and still also planning to interview Jamie Anderson, Chris Thompson. Then doing an interview at Kennedy Space Center with Charles Duke from Apollo 16. It's part of the documentary. So the documentary is moving forward nicely. We're getting through it, getting it done. So yeah.
I remember when you first started talking about it, and now it's like, fast forward about a year and a half later, and it's amazing how everything is just really coming together with that. So it's just really, really exciting times. Yeah. And again, I always bring it up, but Oceanus, I really, really look forward to you making that happen too, because that's just
yeah. Oh yeah. We'll figure that one out too. Yeah. It might be fun to do a show about that someday.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
So, but I'm going to start to wind down, and if folks have any last minute comments that you would like to share, please do so. Just taking a look, see if I missed any. Jeff Rupert had one last comment before. He said, George Lucas says Star Wars for 12-year-olds, and ROTJ felt very much like that, but not Empire. Too uneven.
Well, there you go. Yeah, no, I'm Jeff, I'm like totally cool with the idea that if that's what it is, that's fine. But Empire was not that. Empire was a grown-up movie, which was awesome. That's what it. I don't know, personally, I think that's what it needed to be. It felt like that, and so Return of the Jedi. To suddenly go back to, I didn't even feel like it was for 12-year-olds. That felt like it was for 8-year-olds, in some ways, it just didn't. Yeah. Not that, again, I like Return of the Jedi more than, I'd still watch it again. It's like, I don't personally have a lot of interest in ever seeing the prequels or sequels again, but I'd watch Return of the Jedi again, Yeah.
Well, talking about those three movies real quick, I always said, Star Wars has a special place because it was the first and it was original for the time and everything. But out of the three stories, I always felt Empire was like the best story out of
it's the best storytelling. It's the best storytelling. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, but I'm going to go to the shout outs, Jeffrey, and then I'm going to come back. Randy just commented. He said, Roy and Jeffrey, thank you so much for the wonderful show tonight. Your talent and energy truly lit up the stage and made the evening unforgettable. Your dedication to your art is inspiring, and it was a joy to witness such a magnificent performance. Warm regards, AI.
Thanks, AI. I really appreciate it. Oh man,
boy,
that's great. I love it. I love it.
all
Yeah,
right.
AI is listening to me. It knows. It's yeah. Anyway, I'm just joking. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to go through these quickly. So, yeah, for information. We were just talking about the Eagle documentary. You can go to the website too, just to find out updated information. It's www.eagledocumentary.com.
Correct.
In regards to Sci-Fi Distilled, for our friends Mike and Mary Beth out there, there is no show this Wednesday because they are going to be up in Ticonderoga, so no show on November 15th. And just to give a quick shout out for what's going on in Ticonderoga next weekend, William Shatner is going to be returning to the set tour. So he's going to be there on the 17th, 18th, and 19th. And also, Dave Blass is also going to be up there, who is a production designer for Picard Season 3. And also Darren Dockerman is also going to be up there as well, too. And the newly... they're going to be James is going to be unveiling the auxiliary control room. That's the one addition to the set. It's just about done, and it's going to be unveiled for next weekend. So very exciting about that. And of course, for the Star Trek fans, back in the day, we got to see that for the very first time in the episode The Doomsday Machine, which was really super cool. Want to give a shout out to Country Gate Players, my friend Bill Scarrato. Country Gate is going to be closing the season, and it will be December 9th through the 17th with It's a Wonderful Life, the live radio play. So for information, if you are in the Belvedere, New Jersey area, you can find out information at www.countrygate.org, or you can visit Bill's website, which is www.billscarrato.com. And also want to give a shout out to Captain Phil's Planet. Captain Phil broadcasts on WUSB 90.1 FM, Stony Brook, New York. And right now he's not broadcasting on Thursdays, but you can catch him on Friday nights from 9 to 11:30 p.m., and that is Eastern Standard Time. Also, I want to give a shout out to our friends at the podcast Trek Talking as they promote us. We appreciate their support of the show. And again, for information about them, you can go to Facebook, and it is Trek Talking, a Star Trek podcast. Also want to give a shout out to Martha at Studio One Thrift in regards to the new physical store location. If you are interested in their merchandise, you can go to www.studioonethrift.com. She has quality, stylish, affordable clothing for men and women. You can receive styling updates and information updates. You just need to register at studioonethrift.com. And then also, I want to give a shout out to my co-host and friend, Mr. Ross Amico. And Ross is actually out there too. He just commented, Jeffrey. He just said, "I'm with you, Jeffrey, regarding the Star Wars movies. A snake eating its own tail out of burrows. Sorry not to be able to catch more of the show tonight. Best wishes for the making of Persephone."
Thank you. Yes.
Yes. Ross actually has two shows. He has Picture Perfect, which is on Friday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then he also has The Lost Chord, which is on Saturdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can catch information in regards to it at Classic Ross Amico. And then you can also visit the website for his shows, which is at kwax.uoregon.edu. And lastly, just want to let everybody know that there will be no show next weekend on Fridays or Saturday or Sunday because of Ticonderoga. Excuse me, not Ticonderoga, but William Shatner being at the studio set tour. I'm going to be up there volunteering on Saturday. However, want to let everybody know I'm going to be doing a special broadcast of this show and Roy's Tie-Dye Sci-Fi Corner. It will be Thursday night at 7 p.m. at Eastern Standard Time. And to celebrate William Shatner being at the Star Trek Original Series set tour, thought what better episode to discuss but The Enemy Within, the third episode that was filmed in the first season, which is a classic, and looking forward to talking about and discussing that episode.
I'm Captain Kirk.
Yes.
I'm Captain Kirk.
episode.
Yes. I said, give me the brandy. Such a great episode. Yeah.
It really is. Yeah. The only thing is what they would, since it was done so early. I mean, of course, the question always comes up: why didn't they use the shuttlecraft? But they could have come up with something. Maybe there was a malfunction in the hangar deck and they couldn't get the doors open or something. But
yeah.
But Jeffrey, thanks so much for being on, and very much appreciated. Love our discussions as always. It's always a pleasure. And everybody, thank you for tuning in tonight. We hope you
appreciate everybody spending time with us and everything. Hope you guys will jump over to the Persephone Kickstarter and jump in there. I'd love to build that up even further. We're really happy with how it's turned out. And I think the more success we have with that book, the more that we also can make the case with financiers for the movie too. So it's great. It's very helpful. So we really appreciate everyone's support.
Definitely.
Cool.
Well, as we always like to say, live long and prosper. And we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.